Hey everyone, and welcome to Real Talk Grimm Edition. I'm your host Josh, and this is the place where we dive into the dark, whimsical world of the Brothers Grimm. Whether you're a longtime fan of fairy tales or just starting to discover them, you're in the right spot. Each episode, I'll read a classic Grimm's fairy tale and then explore its deeper meanings, lessons, and how it may apply to our modern culture. From the well-known stories like Cinderella to more obscure ones that still carry a punch, we're going to get into what makes these tales so timeless, and sometimes downright eerie. But this isn't just about reading stories. It's about peeling back the layers and looking at what these stories really teach us. The Grimm brothers didn't shy away from showing the darker side of life. And in many ways, those darker elements hold some of the most powerful messages. Whether it's about good versus evil, human nature, or just the consequences of choices. So whether you're here for the ride of a familiar story or to uncover something you haven't heard before, stick with me as we explore the fascinating and sometimes twisted world of Grimm's fairy tales. Today, we're going to be discussing Old Hildebrand. So grab your favorite drink, sit back, and enjoy the tale. Old Hildebrand. Once upon a time lived a peasant and his wife, and the parson of the village had a fancy for the wife, and had wished for a long while to spend a whole day happily with her. The peasant woman, too, was quite willing. One day, therefore, he said to the woman, "Listen, my dear friend, I have now thought of a way by which we can for once spend a whole day happily together. I'll tell you what. On Wednesday, you must take to your bed and tell your husband you are ill. And if you only complain and act being ill properly and go on doing so until Sunday when I have to preach, I will then say in my sermon that whosoever was at home sick child, a sick husband, a sick wife, a sick father, a sick mother, a sick brother, or whoever else it may be, and makes a pilgrimage to the Grimm Hill in Italy, where you can get a peck of laurel leaves for a cruiser, the sick child, the sick husband, the sick wife, the sick father or sick mother, the sick sister, or whosoever else it may be, will be restored to health immediately." "I will manage it," said the woman promptly. Now, therefore, on Wednesday, the peasant woman took to her bed and complained and lamented as agreed on, and her husband did everything for her that he could think of, but nothing did her any good. And when Sunday came, the woman said, "I feel as ill as if I were going to die at once. But there is one thing I should like to do before my end. I should like to hear the parson's sermon that he is going to preach today." On that the peasant said, "Ah, my child, do not do it. Thou mightest make thyself worse if thou wert to get up. Look, I will go to the sermon and will attend to it very carefully and will tell thee everything the parson says." "Well," said the woman, "go then and pay great attention and repeat to me all that thou hearest." So the peasant went to the sermon, and the parson began to preach and said, if anyone had at home a sick child, a sick husband, a sick wife, a sick father, a sick mother, a sick sister, brother, or anyone else, and would make a pilgrimage to the Grimm Hill in Italy, where a peck of laurel leaves costs a cruiser, the sick child, sick husband, sick wife, sick father, sick mother, sick sister, brother, or whosoever else it might be, would be restored to health instantly. And whosoever wished to undertake the journey was to go to him after the service was over, and he would give him the sack for the laurel leaves and the cruiser. Then no one was more rejoiced than the peasant, and after the service was over, he went at once to the parson, who gave him the bag for the laurel leaves and the cruiser. After that he went home, and even at the house door he cried, "Hurrah, dear wife!" It is now almost the same thing as if thou wert well. The parson has preached today that whosoever had a home, a sick child, a sick husband, a sick wife, a sick father, a sick mother, a sick sister, brother, or whoever it might be, and would make a pilgrimage to the Gockerly Hill in Italy, where a peck of laurel leaves costs a cruiser, the sick child, sick husband, sick wife, sick father, sick mother, sick sister, brother, or whosoever else it was, would be cured immediately. And now I have already got the bag and the cruiser from the parson, and will at once begin my journey, so that thou mayest get well the faster. And thereupon he went away. He was, however, hardly gone before the woman got up, and the parson was there directly. But now we will leave these two for a while, and follow the peasant, who walked on quickly without stopping, in order to get the sooner to the Gockerly Hill, and on his way he met his gossip. His gossip was an egg merchant, and was just coming from the market where he had sold his eggs. "May you be blessed," said the gossip. "Where are you off to so fast?" "To all eternity, my friend," said the peasant. "My wife is ill, and I have been today to hear the parson's sermon, and he preached that if anyone had in his house a sick child, a sick husband, a sick wife, a sick father, a sick mother, a sick sister, brother, or anyone else, and made a pilgrimage to the Gockerly Hill in Italy, where a peck of laurel leaves costs a cruiser, the sick child, sick husband, the sick wife, the sick father, the sick mother, the sick sister, brother, or whosoever else it was, would be cured immediately. And so I have got the bag for the laurel leaves and the cruiser from the parson, and now I am beginning my pilgrimage." "But listen, gossip," said the egg merchant to the peasant. "Are you then stupid enough to believe such a thing as that? Don't you know what that means? The parson wants to spend a whole day alone with your wife in peace, so he has given you this job to do to get you out of the way." "My word," said the peasant, "how I'd like to know if that's true." "Come then," said the gossip, "I'll tell you what to do. Get into my egg basket, and I will carry you home, and then you will see for yourself." So that was settled, and the gossip put the peasant into his egg basket and carried him home. When they got to the house, hurrah, but all was going merry there. The woman had already had nearly everything killed that was in the farmyard, and had made pancakes, and the parson was there, and had brought his fiddle with him. The gossip knocked at the door, and the woman asked who was there. "It is I, gossip," said the egg merchant. "Give me shelter this night. I have not sold my eggs at the market, so now I have to carry them home again, and they are so heavy that I shall never be able to do it, for it is dark already." "Indeed, my friend," said the woman, "thou comest at a very inconvenient time for me, but as thou art here, it can't be helped. Come in and take a seat there on the bench by the stove." Then she placed the gossip in the basket which he carried on his back, on the bench by the stove. The parson, however, and the woman were as merry as possible. At length the parson said, "Listen, my dear friend, thou canst sing beautifully. Sing something to me." "Oh," said the woman, "I cannot sing now. In my young days, indeed, I could sing well enough, but that's all over now." "Come," said the parson once more, "do sing some little song." On that the woman began and sang, "I've sent my husband away from me to the Gockerly Hill in Italy." Thereupon the parson sang, "I wish 'twas a year before he came back. I'd never ask him for the laurel leaf sack." Hallelujah. Then the gossip, who was in the background, began to sing. But I ought to tell you, the peasant was called Hildebrand. So the gossip sang, "What art thou doing, my Hildebrand dear, there on the bench by the stove so near?" Hallelujah. And then the peasant sang from his basket, "All singing I ever shall hate from this day, and here in this basket no longer I'll stay." Hallelujah. And he got out of the basket and cudgeled the parson out of the house. Well, there you have it. The tale of old Hildebrand. A story filled with scheming, deception, a sneaky parson, and a peasant who, let's be honest, takes a little too long to catch on. But in true fairy tale fashion, things don't go quite as planned for our not-so-holy man of the cloth. Now, let's dig into this one. What's the deal with old Hildebrand? What's the story really trying to tell us? Well, at its core, this tale is a warning about lying and manipulation. The parson and the wife think they've come up with the perfect scheme. Fake an illness, send the husband on a fool's errand, and enjoy a day together without consequences. But as we see time and time again in fairy tales, deceit has a way of coming back to bite you. And in this case, it comes in the form of an egg basket ambush and a well-deserved beatdown. This idea isn't just an old-fashioned moral lesson. It's something we see all the time. Lies snowball. People think they can outsmart others, but eventually, the truth tends to find a way to the surface, whether it's in personal relationships, business, or even politics. Dishonesty tends to unravel, sometimes in very public, very embarrassing ways. Then we have our peasant, and Hildebrand himself. At first, he's completely taken in. He trusts the parson without a second thought, eagerly setting off on his ridiculous pilgrimage. But what saves him? A little outside perspective. His friend, Gossip the Egg Merchant, stops him in his tracks, lays out the obvious truth, and helps him to turn the tables. And this is all classic wake up and pay attention type of moment. How often do we just accept what we're told without really thinking about it? Whether it's a too good to be true kind of deal, a social media rumor, or even the things we're taught growing up. Stories like this remind us that just a little skepticism is healthy. Blind trust, especially in those with power and influence, can be extremely dangerous. Speaking of trust, let's talk about the parson. This guy isn't just some random character. He's a religious leader, someone the village likely respects, and yet he completely abuses that trust for his own gain. Now, I'm not saying all authority figures are bad, far from that, but history and current events are full of examples of people in positions of power using their influence to manipulate others. Whether it's corrupt leaders like our politicians, celebrity scandals, even media figures pushing an agenda. Old Hildebrand taps into a very real, very relevant fear. What happens when the people we're supposed to trust aren't actually looking out for our best interests? One of the funniest and most ridiculous parts of this story is the idea of a miracle cure. The parson convinces the villagers that a pilgrimage to the Gookerly Hill will magically heal their loved ones. Sound familiar? I mean, it's straight up misinformation and something we see constantly today. From fake health remedies to internet hoaxes, people are still falling for the same tricks, just in a digital format. Think about the scammy ads that promise a single pill will cure all ailments, or you'll lose all your weight, or countless conspiracy theories that spread like wildfire on the internet. The story of old Hildebrand is basically an old school warning against believing everything you hear, especially when it comes from someone who stands to benefit from your belief. And finally, let's talk about how this all wraps up. The peasant doesn't just expose the truth, he literally beats the parson out of his house. Is it the most diplomatic way to handle things? No. But is it satisfying? Absolutely. Fairy tales often deliver justice in a very direct, no-nonsense kind of way. While I wouldn't recommend solving modern problems with a wooden cudgel, there is something timeless about the idea that those who manipulate and deceive others deserve to be held accountable. Whether it's through public exposure, legal consequences, or just losing people's trust. Wrongdoing rarely goes unpunished. So what can we take from old Hildebrand today? Well, first and foremost, don't be like Hildebrand in the start of the story. Think critically, ask questions, and don't blindly trust authority, especially when something sounds suspiciously convenient. Second, be aware of deception, whether it's in personal relationships, politics, or the media. Lies tend to unravel, and those who manipulate others often get what's coming to them in the end. And lastly, if you ever hear about a miracle cure on some distant hilltop, maybe think twice before grabbing your travel bag. And that wraps up this episode of Real Talk Grimm Edition. I hope you enjoyed diving into the story of old Hildebrand and its deeper meanings as much as I did. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And if you have thoughts on today's tale, whether you agree, disagree, or have your own take, I'd love to hear from you. You can reach out on social media at Real Talk on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky, or send me an email to therealrealtalk@gmail.com. Let me know what you think or just say hi. And if you're enjoying the show, consider leaving a rating or review. It really helps others find Real Talk Grimm Edition, and it keeps the conversation going. And if you're a movie lover, don't forget to check out our other shows, Real Talk and Real Talk Horror Edition, where it's all things movies all the time. But for now, thanks for listening, and until next time, stay curious, question the stories around you, and keep exploring the darker side of fairy tales.